Week 15 gives us the biggest matchup of the season when defending champion New England visits red-hot Pittsburgh in a battle for AFC supremacy. We'll provide in-depth analysis on that game and every other key game for Week 15 with the latest trends, injury updates, odds, and picks, including the latest Super Bowl futures and division races, as OFN NFL Preview with Tony Mejia on the Our-Lads Football Radio Network starts now. All right, thanks for tuning in to OFN NFL Preview for Week 15 in the NFL with Tony Mejia, independent sports columnist and exclusive handicapper at VegasInsider.com for this Thursday, December 14th, 2017. So, Tony, first it was Deshaun Watson, now Carson Wentz. You get the feeling if the Steelers can't stop the Patriots, then who can?
I mean, I guess. This is a weird week to phrase it that way, considering what we saw. I guess Tom Brady can. Right?
Yeah, he can. Yeah, he did not play well last week.
No, it was really not his best effort. And again, it's a one-off. He's had bad games this year before, probably not quite that bad. But yeah, you definitely don't want to see that in December. It's okay in September. But, what we saw from him is just missing throws and things that probably won't happen again. So you're right. I mean, at this point with Carson Wentz going down, I amended my latest Super Bowl prediction, and New England Patriots are my champions. So there you go.
All right. Well, there are some possibilities that are out there other than New England. And I think part of it is, even though the Patriots are still up there with Pittsburgh 2-1, 3-1, and we completely understand that. But I don't know. I mean, I think that because the Patriots do look vulnerable, I think the defense that we talked about earlier this season, and I think it showed its ugly head a few other times recently in the last few weeks when we kind of really got to understand that this, okay, really good secondary, but outside of that, they just don't put enough pressure on the quarterback. They don't have any of those key guys in the front seven at all that they've had. Even the Hightower, who made such a huge play in the Super Bowl last year, and there was their best front seven player heading into the season. I just think that those are the types of injuries that will catch up to them in the big games in the postseason. I'm not necessarily saying that because they lost to the Dolphins, but I just think it was just a little bit of a glimpse that with that combined with the fact that I just don't know if Tom Brady is 100% healthy. And let's put it this way. He's not 100% healthy. I don't know how bad he is, though, because we never know what to think about those injury reports with the Patriots. But now, after the way he's been playing recently and the awful performance on Monday night, I'm going, well, wait a second. Is there really something wrong with him?
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's just out of rhythm at this point. We'll see this week. This is a much better conversation to table and have next week because If we're talking about the Patriots coming off a win over the Steelers with home field, coming in their back pocket,
it's over.
Then it's going to be a much easier road, obviously. And then if we're talking about him going on the road and maybe another bumpy performance, I probably will change my Super Bowl pick at that point, and then the sky can be falling around Foxborough.
All right. So before we get into that game, let us, by the way, how about this? We were talking about favorites really dominating for about 6 straight weeks, second half of the season, until the last 2 weeks. Now, I don't know I'm very surprised about this because usually at the end of the season, the better teams put away the dogs, but the favorite, who still is 126-63, and these are my stats, so they might be off a pick or two, but 126-63. But that's a number that has shrinking the last couple of weeks. Just 19-12 the last 2 weeks. The favorite has beaten the underdog. So and last week it was a lot of dogs won. So I'm a little bit surprised about that.
No, I mean week 12 I think was the pinnacle week for favorites over dogs, and we got miracle covers late with Derrick Henry's touchdown and another stuff. I think was another Jacksonville backdoor cover. Anyway, the bottom line is that all those things kind of average out And I think we've seen that happen over the last 2 weeks. Might continue to happen this week, but it went on almost unprecedented run there for a few weeks to be as lopsided as your figures dictate, which are basically right on the money.
And of course, winning and covering are still the dominating deal, though. 174 to 27. So another reason to don't worry too much about the odds. If you think the team's going to win, then go ahead. Especially same thing with the dogs. You think they're going to win? Go ahead and take the damn money line. Why don't you? You might as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell when lines are inflated, but really they can only be inflated to a certain point before the action on the other side becomes overwhelming. So I mean, you're really looking at numbers that at max, you'd have to get a touchdown instead of a field goal to secure because the line's maybe 3 points higher than it should.
Last Thursday, we had a big game between the Saints and Atlanta. We're not having such a game tonight. Denver and the Colts. Denver favorite by 2.5 on the road. These two teams are fighting for pick space now. Colts right now have the 4th pick in the draft. They're tied with San Francisco with 3 wins. And Denver has the 6th pick in the draft. They're tied with Tampa Bay and Chicago with 4 wins. To me, I'd say this, and I'm not gonna. Look, Jets obviously played awful last week, but Denver's defense did play well, and it seemed like, and this is the thing that you don't know from week to week on teams that aren't going well, like the Broncos, is are they going to show up? Are they going to play the game hard? And Denver did play the game hard last week, and if Denver plays the game hard tonight with that defense, I see no reason to think that they won't beat the Colts tonight, but we don't know. We don't know what to expect. And I'll go with the Broncos tonight, but it's definitely a game I'm not going to advise anybody to touch, with two teams combining for 7-19 record.
Right, yeah. I mean, what I wrote in my preview today is this being, I mean, we've had a couple clunkers earlier in the season, but this is, the Thursday night finale, and neither team has anything to play for, and all we've heard all year is how these players hate playing on these short weeks, and they think that the increase of the odds of injury increase. So you never know what kind of effort you're going to get, and even if this was Saints Falcons, and now that it's Broncos Colts, and they're two teams with nothing to play for, you're gonna. It's hard to guess who's going to pull back. But yeah, the sharp money's on the Broncos. They're a road favorite. Obviously coming off a shutout loss and then ending that 8-game losing streak.
All right. Now the Saturday games. We're going to get some Saturday games here, and we have the first game is going to be Chicago and Detroit. And even though Detroit has dominated the series of late, winning 8 of 9, these have been close matchups. The last 6 in this series have been decided by a total of 22 points, including the last 5 in the series by 4 points or less, which is why Chicago is 4-1-1 against the spread in their last 6 versus Detroit, including a push on November 19th in which the Lions were a 3-point road favorite, beat the Bears 27-24. Connor Barth misses the field goal with 3 seconds left. We thought maybe that game was going to overtime. It didn't. So Detroit's a 5.5-point favorite here. So you would think, hey, okay, maybe this is a good spot for the dog to cover. And you know what? I'm kind of leaning that way. I mean, I did take the Bears last week to beat the Bengals in a similar spot, right about 6, 2-1 money line. I feel good about the Bears again here. And I think the big matchup, though, more importantly, is definitely, for me, is going to be the fact that Detroit still got a banged-up offensive line. You've got T.J. Lang, who's not practicing but is expected to play. Ricky Wagner, the right tackle, looks like he's going to miss his second straight week. That means Corey Robinson, who's a weak player, is going to have to move out to right tackle. Swanson looks like he's not going to play again. He's got a concussion issue, and that means Graham Glasgow, who's a pretty good player, but when Glasgow moves over to center, then that means that they have to start either Joe Dahl or Don Barclay at left guard, and those guys have a combined 34 snaps this season, and Chicago is a pretty good interior defensive team. Akeem Hicks having a big year, Eddie Goldman and such, so I think if Chicago can dominate the offensive line, force Detroit to be a one-dimensional team, which I expect it'll happen, it's all going to be up to Matthew Stafford.
Right. I mean, it has been, but I was on the Bears last week too, and they were impressive. No Swanson. That's official now. He's not going to make it through protocol. So your offensive line scenario plays out with basically a raw guard and your backup center working. So yeah, I mean, there's no question the Bears could win this outright. Stafford at this point is playing injured, but doing a decent job of it. And at home, I think it's a little less of a concern. That they'll be able to get play calls. If this was at Soldier Field, obviously, I think this game would be a pick 'em, and I'd lean Bears. Being at home, I think the Lions have a good shot.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, honestly, I think Detroit wins a close game. But as I just said, if I'm going to go with winning and covering, I think this is one of those upset plays that I'd roll the dice with. But the trend tells you exactly what I think is going to happen here. The Detroit wins another close game in this series, but I'd go ahead and roll the dice and maybe go ahead and take Chicago with that 2-1 number. Trevathan has been back the last couple of weeks. Since he's returned, they've only allowed one touchdown. Andy Dalton was going through a nice run stretch, and they just destroyed Dalton, and that's with a lot of the key guys out too. I mean, Floyd, Young, Unreen. All these guys are out for the year. Freeman's out for the year. McPhee's been banged up. Demps has been out. Goldman has missed some time. That's a lot of guys that have been out. But when Trevathan comes back, I mean, he's been the heart and soul of that defense. And you even mentioned that a few weeks ago.
Yep, sure did. And yeah, he was suspended, rightfully so. Although I think it was one game longer than I thought he could get. And yeah, since he's been back, he's clearly the cog in that middle of the defense.
Abdullah does come back, but I don't think it's going to matter. Detroit with the 32nd ranked rushing offense. So, and I said this last year, and they didn't look. I like the direction of this Detroit team. I like the GM. I think they're heading in the right direction, trying to become more of a power team. But you can't become a power team on the line of scrimmage and in the running game without a power back. And that's what they need to do. They have to go into the draft. They have to draft a big guy that can run between the tackles. You make Abdullah a third down back, and a number 2 back, a change of pace guy, and that's what you have to do here. And you got to give Matthew Stafford a break. And I think if you can do that with the offensive line healthy, I think Detroit will be a much better equipped team next year. But this year they're not going to be able to run the ball this week at all. So I think that's part of the reason why I like the Bears in this one. By the way, do you like Mitch Trubisky? Is there anything that it's hard to evaluate him with the injuries, and especially, of course, he doesn't have anything at receiver. Is there anything about him that you go, okay, I think he could make it. I think it's somebody that the Bears can be hopeful for.
Yeah, they should be hopeful. He's got good instincts, and he's got to work with at least a number 1. He's got number 3s and 4s as a number 1. So yeah, let's definitely. I think if you're optimistic about Mitch Trubisky, you're not it's not unfounded. So he's even that first game where he covered I think against Minnesota, and that's a tough first matchup. He showed some instincts. There was a backdoor cover that they should have never gotten because the pass he threw to the end zone for his first touchdown pass should have been picked off. But he's held himself to decent regard in a tough situation.
By the way, keep this in mind. Detroit 3-0 straight up, 2-0-1 against the spread their last 3 games as a favorite. They will play at Cincinnati next week. And so if they can win, and they'll be favored next week, as long as they win this week, and you would think they'll be favored anyway. But if they win this week, they'll be favored next week, and then they end the season at home against the Packers. So huge game coming up here on Saturday for Detroit against the Bears. Now the big game, the first big game of the week is Saturday night, the Chargers and the Chiefs, and we've been waiting for this game for several weeks. And the Chiefs did get their win last week. Kind of felt that that timing was right with the Raiders, the overrated Raiders coming in. Chiefs dominated the game, almost let it slip in the second half, but that was really more of a strategy situation. The defense letting the Raiders off the hook there, and letting them kind of dink and dunk down the field, which is never always a wise strategy when you're dominating, but so be it. The Chiefs win the game, dominate the Raiders. Now the Chargers coming in 7-2 in their last 9 after an 0-4 start, and they're taking on the Chiefs, who have beaten them 7 straight times. Chiefs beat him by 14 early on this season. Hunt had a big game, 172 yards rushing. Phillip Rivers, no touchdowns and 3 picks in that game. And this has not been a great matchup for Rivers for whatever reason over the last few years. He's had a lot of problems with the Chiefs. But a lot of things have changed for Kansas City. You talked about this last week. A lot of things have changed for Kansas City offensively since Matt Nagy has been taking over with the run-pass option play calling. It's been working for the Chiefs, and they seem to be getting back into rhythm.
Yeah, and this will be a tough test for Smith because even with the Giants who really disrupted them, and with the Jets who showed up against them, the Chiefs haven't faced a defense as effective as the Chargers can be.
True.
In quite some time. So, we'll see exactly what the play calling change will bring this week. And from Phillip Rivers' standpoint, he's a different quarterback now than he was then, and seems to be in a rhythm, a very healthy offense. This is a team peaking at the right time. Kansas City has Tamba Ali back, gets Marcus Peters back from suspension. So fair fight. Let's go at it.
Yeah, Darrelle Revis is in his second game. So we'll see how that impacts the Chiefs secondary. So far, so good after one game. Last time, and it's only a 1-point Charger spread, so we don't know what's going to happen by game time. But the last time the Chiefs were a home dog was 2014. They were home dog twice that year. They won both games. And I don't know. This one's a tricky one. This one, as far as picking the game, I really don't know which way I'm going to go. I'm leaning towards the Chargers at this point, but I could change my mind in the next day or two. I've been going back and forth this week, obviously because the Chargers have been playing so well, so much more consistent than the Chiefs. I get the feeling maybe it's overdue that the Chargers win one of these matchups. But on the flip side, I also look at the fact that the Chargers and Phillip Rivers, I really like the direction that this team is going because, as we talked about last week, the offensive line is giving him some time to throw the football, which has been an issue in recent years. And Rivers is one of those top quarterbacks to never play in a Super Bowl. And I'm adding a few futures this week, and I'm adding the Chargers. I think the Chargers are one of those teams, and we saw the Chargers give the Patriots a pretty good game last month. I think the Chargers are one of those teams. You get them in the postseason, even if they have to go to Pittsburgh or New England, and they are going to battle those teams to the end because of Phillip Rivers. I think it's 16-1. You're looking for value, Super Bowl value outside the Patriots and the Steelers. I think here's value with the Chargers.
Sure, there is. Absolutely. I mean, I was hesitant to pull the plug on them early, even after the disastrous start, just because you could see the ingredients there. To me, it was easier for me when Verrett went down because I really like Verrett and Hayward as corners with, the Bosa and the pass rush being as effective as they were. All of a sudden you put game situations in there and that defense could create, points themselves. And we've seen that happen even with him out. We've just seen a team that has gelled. I kind of like the Chiefs at home too. I think that's the great equalizer. But I'll have a pick on this game on Saturday at BI. My guaranteed pick will be on this game. So
all right,
I'll leave it at that. But it's a great matchup, and obviously everyone's looking forward to it. I like that Lions-Bears matchup simply because the Lions have something to play for. But clearly, this is the game we're looking forward to with the bad Thursday nighter. Yeah,
we talked last week also about Gus Bradley doing a really good job. I mean, look, some guys are just really good coordinators and not very good head coaches. And Gus Bradley's doing a tremendous job as the Chargers defensive coordinator, not just because he's got Bosa and Melvin Ingram, but as we talked about that secondary, you mentioned, of course, Casey Hayward, but Desmond King, the rookie. I know Dan Shonka was very high on Desmond King as a potential first, second-round draft pick going into the draft last year, and he slid all the way to the 5th round. Also, Trevor Williams has done a remarkable job this year. So that secondary has been a big lift for the Chargers. You throw in the pass rush. That's a great combination. Now, Travis Coons, keep in mind, if it comes down to a last-second kick, the Chargers are 1-4 in games decided by 3 points or less. This is something we talked a lot about early on this season. The Chargers have not done well in close scoring games. and they've got a young kicker, Travis Coons, who's hit 7 straight field goals. He missed the first one after replacing Novak and went on IR. 5th kicker, by the way, for the Chargers this year. But he's hit 7 straight. He'll go up against Harrison Butker in this game. And Butker, of course, took over early on this season. And he's having a very good season, 28 out of 30 kits. So if it comes down to a big kick in a close game, just keep in mind, the Chargers, they are a hot West Coast team, warm weather team. We'll see what kind of weather we get on a Saturday night. Could be cool. You could be in your 30s. I haven't checked the weather. I don't know if you have, but
gotta check the weather.
Yeah, you have to. It could be a very cool game, which could affect the kicking, definitely the passing game, which maybe Melvin Gordon and of course Hunt come into the picture. By the way, Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher have had good seasons for the Chiefs, so that's a nice matchup. Kansas City tackles against that outside pass rush for the Chargers. By the way, Kansas City will host Miami next week, and then they go to Denver to end the season. So that's a good 2 games for the Chiefs to end the season. You get the feeling the Chiefs win this game, it's over, because they'll have a 1-game lead on the Chargers, which is a 2-game lead because they would have beaten them twice. There's no way the Chiefs, if they beat the Chargers on Saturday night, will lose both to Miami and to Denver. So if the Chiefs win this game, this division is over, and then the Chargers have to worry about the wild card. Keep in mind, right now they're already the 8th seed, and so depending on what the Titans do and the Bills do and Baltimore does, this is just a huge game for the Chargers. Much bigger game, I think, for the Chargers probably than the Chiefs.
Yeah, absolutely. But and if you're those fans in Buffalo or Baltimore, you're rooting for Kansas City, obviously.
And the Chargers will be at New York to take on the Jets and then host Oakland. So both teams have favorable matchups after this one. So another reason to think that whoever wins this game is going to be in really good shape, and any other team has to worry. By the way, the Chiefs are 30-1 to win the Super Bowl. So even though they're tied for first, the Chiefs are 30-1 and the Chargers are 16-1. Okay, let's now go on to the big game on Sunday. The biggest game maybe of the year, the Patriots and the Steelers. So many different ways to look at this game. 8-game win streak snapped last week for the Patriots. Again, they just did not look good at all. Brady looked as bad as I've seen him look the past year or two. Pittsburgh, meanwhile, they have an 8-game win streak now, even though 4 of their last 5 wins have come on game-winning last-second field goals by Chris Boswell. And they clinched home field. They will clinch, by the way, home field advantage if they get the win over the Patriots in this one. This can go so many different ways. I'm actually, tell you the truth, I am leaning towards the Steelers, which is something I can't even believe I'm saying. Because I don't like taking the Steelers against the Patriots. We've talked about this before. It's a bad matchup for the Steelers. But look, if the Patriots come out and play to their optimum level, and I know that, again, I just said in the very beginning of the show, I don't think that talent-wise they're where they were last year. But as long as they play at the best that they could play based on the talent that they're going to have on the field, and I don't think that they're going to have so many injuries that you're going to have to – because people, I think, that was too much last week about the injuries. The injuries had nothing to do with them getting beat by the Dolphins. Nothing. So if the Patriots come out and play a very good football game, I think they're going to win this game. Problem is, I don't know if that's going to happen. Last week's game, I don't know. I mean, I'm a little bit worried, like as I mentioned, about Brady, and I don't know if I'm thinking about the way the Steelers have been winning games. They just seem to be so hot right now. They're being able to do whatever they want offensively. If they need a score, they get a score. That maybe, and look, it's not like the Patriots have beaten the Steelers 12 straight times. Every once in a while, the Steelers win one of these games, and if it's going to happen, maybe it happens on Sunday.
Well, it depends on the sense of urgency, because one of the criticisms is that they always play that zone against them, right?
True.
And Brady just picks them apart.
True.
So, how much do you want to show if you're Pittsburgh? Because presumably you're going to run into these guys down the road. How invested are you in making sure that this game is back in Pittsburgh in January?
Very important to make sure about that.
So that's, I mean, but my point is if you're Mike Tomlin, how invested are you? That's, how much do you want to throw out there? Because if you want to throw the kitchen sink at them, yeah, you can beat the Patriots at home this week. Throw in some wrinkles. You're obviously going to have to discard them, so you're using them now as opposed to in a few weeks. And sure, at this point, New England's right for the picking based on Brady's level of play, them coming in off a short week. Gronkowski getting him back from suspension should help, but it's a group that is wobbling down the stretch, and I think Pittsburgh, despite the loss of Shazier, you have a team that's kind of coming together. They're hoping to get Hayden and Matakevich back to upgrade that defense.
Yeah, getting Hayden back would be important, no question. Even if he comes back, though, you do wonder how effective he'll be. The big matchup, though, might be the rookie T.J. Watt on Gronk, because Gronk has 8 career touchdowns in 5 games against the Steelers, so he's killed the Steelers. So the T.J. Watt matchup is important. Brady in his last last 7 games against the Steelers has averaged 324 yards passing and a 22-0 touchdown to interception ratio. So that's what we just mentioned with the whole zone thing. You just can't. Now, if you're going to play zone, one thing is definite. You better get to Brady. And that's what the Steelers are going to have to do. They must put pressure on Brady. And I do like the Steelers' defensive line. I think they have the ability to pressure Brady, to make him move around the pocket, which is not what he wants to do. It's not that he can't do it. It's just not what he wants to do. So that's kind of another reason why I think and by the way, on the flip side, I'm not so sure Antonio Brown's going to be the big factor in this game. I think the big factor is going to have to be Le'Veon Bell, because that Patriots secondary is the strength of their defense. And it's Le'Veon Bell and his ability to have a huge game that I think will decide this, because he just has not come up big enough in these recent matchups.
Yeah, I mean, but at this point, Brown, he's still going to get so much attention in the passing game. You probably see big games from Smith-Schuster, who comes back from suspension, or Brian, or even Jesse James, who's not dropping passes this year, which is good for him. Look, if you were to think about this game or be ready to be surprised on Monday morning, who blows who out? I'd be more shocked if the Patriots post the blowout of the Steelers.
I agree.
And vice versa. So
I agree.
It might be one way to lean, but if it's tight, definitely something New England can pull out.
Because look, it's not that we've seen the Patriots get blown out before. That doesn't mean they ain't gonna win the Super Bowl. It just means they had a bad week and things just for whatever reason aren't going well for them. And I could see that. Again, not a blowout, but I could see that happening more than the reverse, the way the Steelers are playing right now. Because the Steelers, and as much as they almost lost the game last week, fact is, I don't think the Steelers overall can't play better than this. They've won 8 straight games. They're winning close games. Again, the offense is doing anything they want. Yes, the Shazier loss was huge, and I think we saw that last week. I mean, without Shazier and Joe Hayden, they had big issues. And and we know Shazier's not coming back, so if Hayden is not ready and not 100%, how ineffective will they be? And if they beat the Patriots, they're probably going to have to win the same way they won last week, something maybe in the 30s. That's possible.
Yeah, right now I think it's up to Pittsburgh to see how badly they want this game. Is there going to be a level of trepidation to Haley's play calling, like there always is, that leaves the door open because Brady will walk through it? If you want to remove all doubt, the Steelers have a good chance at looking at some deep balls and really decimating a New England defense that struggled most of the year.
I mean, one of the things that I don't think I can see the Patriots doing that Baltimore was able to do on Sunday was run the ball as effectively. New England look, they're not a running team. Yeah, they'll be able to run the ball sometimes, but that's because you're paying so much attention to Tom Brady. But I don't see them running the ball as effectively, anywhere near as effectively as Baltimore ran the ball last week. And that was a big reason why Baltimore almost won that football game. So it's going to have to be a different way that the Patriots do it. By the way, they're a 3-point road favorite in this one. So Patriots favorite by 3. That makes sense, though, right? You think that's the line is right where it should be?
I was surprised by it. I mean, I think based on what you saw from New England on Monday night, Pittsburgh being at home with a winning streak, I thought it'd be closer to a pick'em. It's the respect that the Patriots get, obviously, but yeah, I was surprised by the line. And at this point, it's held steady, no action either way, which is tells you that they put it in the right spot as far as
Okay.
they're concerned, the odds makers.
Patriots, by the way, have not lost 2 straight games since the end of the 2015 season in weeks 16 and 17. And they, just like potentially if they lose this one, both games were on the road. And by the way, they lost 4 of their last 6 games that year. That was the year that they lost the championship game to Denver by 2 points when they were that close away from tying the game. And then at the end on a 2-point conversion. And of course, Denver went on. Well, Pittsburgh is going to be in Houston next week, host Cleveland, so you feel pretty good about the Steelers winning at least 13 games this season. So even if they lose this game, they might have a shot for home field. Problem is Patriots end the season at home against the Bills and the Jets.
Westgate odds have the Patriots at 6-5 to win the AFC. The Steelers right behind them at 8-5. Obviously, those change if the Steelers win, and Super Bowl's odds. These are the top 2 Super Bowl contenders. With the Pats are the favorite at 9-4. Steelers right behind them at 3-1.
All right, next let's go to a big game out west. Game of the year in the NFC West: Rams and Seattle. Seahawks favorite by 2.5. And for the Rams, looks like they're getting Robert Woods back, so that's nice timing. But keep in mind, big loss for the Rams. Kayvon Webster, Achilles injury. He's out for the season. He's one of their starting corners. That means Nickel Roby Coleman steps up in the starting lineup. Now, he's had a nice season, so he's not the issue. It's the guys behind him. So it's the depth corners to keep an eye on the rest of the season for the Rams. I'm not so sure that comes into play in this particular game, but that's something to keep an eye on later on down the road. But what I am more focused on what the injury status of the other side with Seattle, because I'm not really confident that Bobby Wagner is going to play. I'm not confident KJ Wright's going to play. You got both guys missing most of the second half last week, and look what happened to them in the second half last week against Jacksonville. You've got Wagner, been dealing with this hamstring injury now for about a month. They should sit him down. Now, I know it's hard to do when you're 7th in the playoff race. I get that. But if he's not going to be 100%, it's one game. Go out there, try to win this game. If you lose this game, look, you lose the division. It doesn't mean you can't win a wild card. But I'd rather, if you think you can get Wagner back to being really healthy for the last 2 games of the season, I do it. If it's a lingering thing the rest of the season, you got to play him, of course. But KJ Wright's also going through concussion protocol, which is never good. But that's the reason I'm concerned with Seattle in this game, because without Wagner and without KJ Wright, they're already without Chancellor. They're already without Richard Sherman. I mean, it's just too many key guys on defense, and the Rams, this young upstart team, this would be a huge breakout performance for them to win the NFC West. I kind of like the Rams in this one. I really do. I think there's just too many injuries right now for Seattle on defense, and unless Russell Wilson has one of his big games, which is always possible, unless that happens, I kind of like the Rams in this one.
Well, I guess Pete Carroll says Wagner is optimistic that he'll play, and they believe that he will. So, we'll see. And I think there's no way that he won't be out there if he's at least 75%. Even though I probably would tend to agree with you in terms of getting, the only way hamstrings heal or truly is to rest. I think they feel like there's no room for error, and you got to win now. Not sure about Wright and where he is in terms of protocol at the moment. So, getting him back would obviously be huge. I think to get to your point about Webster, it's a tough spot to lose him here, because I do think that the Seahawks can take advantage of it. I do think that you get lost in coverage with guys like Lockett and Richardson, having the potential for huge afternoons in terms of Russell Wilson buying time and coverage being slanted towards Doug Baldwin. So this is a game where his absence will be felt. Tremaine Johnson's going to play through a stinger, so that obviously upgrades secondary that we really lost without him. To me, if the weather holds up, I think this is a potential shootout where Wilson has to rescue a result. For Seattle, I mean, for the Rams, from their standpoint, great opportunity for Goff to again show his development and win a huge road game in in an environment it's not going to be comfortable.
Yeah, you see, and kind of the reason I'm leaning towards the Rams in this one is because the Rams, and I'm not worried at all about what happened earlier this season for the Rams offensively when Goff didn't play well and they shut down Gurley. That's because all the key guys on defense for Seattle were playing. So that's completely different than what's going on here talent-wise for Seattle on defense. And then if you look the last couple of years with this matchup, the Rams have really done a good job the last couple of years. Even last year, they did a good job in dominating the line of scrimmage against Seattle. Russell Wilson has not had big games against the Rams compared to other teams that he's faced, especially in this division. And I think if the Ram defense can do what they usually do against Seattle in that offensive line and dominate the line of scrimmage and hold Russell Wilson in check, then I feel pretty good about the fact that the Rams offensively, we saw what happened last week against a really good team, that they're going to be able to be that much better against Seattle this time around with all the injuries and go out there and make a statement in this division and put it to bed because they win this game. Now, I don't see anything that says they clinch the division. But fact is, with the Rams hosting San Francisco in Week 17, you would think, even though with Garoppolo, that the Rams would be able to win that game. They're at Tennessee next week. Seattle will be in Dallas next week and then host Arizona. By the way, Seattle just 2-4-1 against the spread in their last 7. But I'm gonna go with the Rams. Even though I must say this, I mean, this is one team that I have probably lost more on this season than any other team, either going for them or going against them. It seems like every time I go with Seattle, Russell Wilson doesn't have like a great game, and I go against him, and he has one of his best games. So
yeah, key injury to monitor is Andrew Whitworth too, because you saw what the Seahawks were able to do to Carson Wentz with a group that it'll be very similar if this includes both Wagner and Wright, and he's out potentially with an ankle issue. Left the last game with, and Rob Havenstein also left last week's game. So, some issues up front. Again, to me, the house is coming at times. I want to see how Goff handles it, especially since McVay is often his eyes and ears. So, it's a big time spot for me to see how seriously to take LA in the playoffs.
All right. Next up, we have another huge game, Packers and Carolina. So this is going to be one of the big games for the Packers, who, by the way, sit number 9 in the NFC. So even if they win this game, they're still a game behind Carolina. So keep that in mind. But look, the couple teams in front of them, Seattle's got the big game with the Rams as a 7 seed, and Detroit's got the game on Saturday night as the 8 seed. And again, the Green Bay Packers will play Detroit. So Week 17. So they don't care about Detroit. Detroit's not something that Green Bay has to worry about. It's definitely Seattle, even though, of course, Green Bay's got the win over Seattle. So they just got to make sure that if maybe they get lucky enough, the Rams can beat them. All of a sudden, the Packers find themselves in a really good situation down the stretch that all they really need is one loss by one of the teams they're chasing, and then of course they've got to run the table. They're hosting Minnesota next week, and they're at Detroit after that. But to me, I think this is the toughest game out of the 3 because Carolina, they've won some big games this year. I also think Carolina, I've already taken them in my futures a few weeks ago, and I'm thinking about taking them again because they're 20-1 to win the Super Bowl. That's not a bad number. With the Eagles now where they are without Wentz, we'll get to that in a little bit. That opens the door completely for a team like Carolina to win the NFC. And so at 20-1, I kind of like that number because I say to myself, hey, all they got to do is win the NFC, and I'm sitting there at 20-1 in the Super Bowl. Where they'll only be a 2-1 dog. So I feel pretty good about Carolina's chances, but and that even means that they lose this game because the Packers with Aaron Rodgers, you just don't know what you're going to get. You get the feeling that he'll play well after the way the Packers have won overtime games the last couple of weeks. You just get the sneaking suspicion that maybe the Packers might have a run coming.
Yeah, I mean, they might. I never saw Aaron Rodgers short, but it's a tough situation to be placed in against, Keith Lee in that defense. They should have lost to the Browns last week. I had Cleveland in that game and got burnt by the OT touchdown.
Oh yeah, they should have lost that game. Sure, yeah.
So yeah, like how much of a difference is Aaron Rodgers going to make? Obviously, a humongous upgrade from Hundley, but it's still a team that almost lost to the Browns and should have.
Well, that's the NFL though with those great quarterbacks. So that's the and look, are the Packers talent wise where they need to be to win a Super Bowl? Normal years, no. But again, this is why I said at the open, I don't think that these teams, the Patriots, are not as good as they were last year. So a team like the Packers, who, by the way, even though I got them at 200-1 2 weeks ago, they're now down to 40-1. And that might not even be a bad number, because if you can get the Packers into the playoffs right now at 40-1 with 3 weeks to go, why not? Especially without Carson Wentz. Why not?
Yeah, there's 20-1 to win the NFC, which is a good number too. I elevated New Orleans as my NFC champ, and they're at 9-2, the favorite now, I believe. No, they're favored over Philly and Minnesota 3-1. So I didn't even realize that they were favored now to win the NFC. But that's who I went to.
Okay. And then Jonathan Stewart, he's going to have to play like he did last week, because he has historically been a good late season rusher. When the weather turns, he's a big guy, physical guy. He had a huge game against an excellent run defense. So if Carolina is going to have a shot moving forward to go deep into the playoffs, Stewart's going to have to play well. The reason why I think the Packers may not be a bad play here is because you've got Aaron Rodgers going up against that weak secondary. Worley and Bradbury have been pretty bad this year, and that's the one spot on defense that Carolina is going to need to upgrade in the offseason. And that's the big difference, by the way, from the team that they were when they went to the Super Bowl to the team that they are now. That is a major weakness. You get in the postseason, you go up against some really good quarterbacks, and Carolina is going to be susceptible in the passing game. And I think that's how Green Bay is going to have to win this football game. They're getting 3 in the game, and we'll see whether or not Aaron Rodgers can make it interesting in the NFL as far as the postseason is concerned, especially with Carson Wentz out. By the way, Carolina will host Tampa Bay next week and then be in Atlanta on week 17. Let's go to the Sunday night game, Dallas and Oakland. And Dallas is a 3-point favorite in this one on the road. They get the big late fourth quarter, destroy the Giants in that one. By the way, if Steve Spagnuolo was like auditioning for a head coaching job, I think he lost that right away. Because
he's a coordinator.
I know.
He's already proven that.
I mean, it's because I had the Cowboys in this game. Every time the Giants had the ball, I think there were 2 or 3 circumstances that the Giants had the ball, like around midfield or like at the Dallas 40 on like 4th and reasonably short. And every single time I was like, please punt. And he punted every time. I mean, you're like going nowhere, and he doesn't go for it in any of those circumstances. And it played right into what you would want as the opposite. You don't want the Giants going for it. I'm sorry, you just don't. You don't want them to have, they made a 4th down, and now that could open things up for a big score drive. So anyway, the Cowboys were able to finally wear him down, and they get Elliott back next week. You know what? I like the Cowboys in this game because same reason why I didn't believe in the Raiders last week against the Chiefs. I still don't believe in them. There's no reason to believe in the Raiders. They only beat bad teams. The Cowboys are not a bad team. So I like the Cowboys in this spot.
Yeah, Amari Cooper tried to come back last week after some uncertainty with him probably not making the trip, and then all of a sudden he showed up at practice at the last possible moment and boarded the flight. Suits up in Kansas City and then gets rolled up on.
Yep.
And it's a high ankle sprain, presumably. So
bad.
I think we've seen the last of him this season.
Yep.
Which just tells you, it's been a disappointing, almost doomed year for a team I thought had Super Bowl aspirations. So they're done. And I mean, I don't see them rallying to beat Dallas. But I mean, it's a weird team, so this could be a game that they get up for, and with minimal pressure, their talent could win out, and they could beat the Cowboys, who are also kind of cursed this season.
Yeah, but the thing with the Cowboys, though, now look, I mean, I don't know when I look at 80-1 to win the Super Bowl, of course, I think there's a big difference, just like you were saying, with the Packers, 40-1, 20-1, big difference. I would agree with you on that spot. Taking the Packers at 20-1 as opposed to the Super Bowl is not a bad idea. And the same thing with the Cowboys, because I think the NFC is wide open, and at 80-1, it's such a big number. I'm assuming 40-1 in the NFC, that you get Zeke back next week. You get Seattle at home. You can win that game. You can win in Philly. If you can run the table, you might be able to get to the postseason. And with Zeke and everybody back being healthy, including Lee and Tyron Smith, maybe they could do something. Now, I'm not going to pick them, but I'm just saying that that's a possibility. And part of the reason is because I would think that chances are, even with Zeke, that they probably would drop one of those final two games, unless the Philly game in Week 17 is a game where the Eagles just don't play anybody.
Yeah, I mean, in a Hail Mary dream scenario, sure. I mean, that's been the case with the NFC this whole season. Like, really, nobody knew what to expect because there was to a certain extent parity. Nobody saw the Rams coming, and they joined the party. The Saints and they're blossoming. I mean, we entered the season with the Giants as one of the top NFC favorites, and look what happened to them. So I think the strategy of keeping your options open in the NFC, considering it is going to be whoever peaks at the right time, is probably a wise one.
All right, next is Miami and Buffalo, and this is actually a pretty important game as far as the wild card race is concerned. The Bills are sitting there in 6th place. Just shows you the state of the AFC wild card picture when the Bills are the 6th team and they're 300-1 to win the Super Bowl. Miami is the number 10 team coming off a season-saving win over the Patriots. These two teams are going to play each other 2 of the next 3 weeks. They'll be in Miami Week 17. Buffalo's a 3.5-point favorite. They get the Tyrod Taylor back. They've won 2 out of 3. The Dolphins have won 2 straight. Dolphins swept the Bills last year, winning 2 3-point games. I actually like the Bills in this spot. Miami coming up a short week. They played over their heads. They'll come back down to earth a little bit. The weather, while probably not going to see the snowstorm we saw last week, you would think that this would have some sort of an impact with Miami, cold weather environment. Miami's going to have to play as good as they played last week to win this game. If they do, they win the game. I don't see that happening. I kind of like the Bills in this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to get Taylor back. So Joe Webb, the season looked lost. Joe Webb throws that interception late in the fourth.
It did. Yeah.
And
I mean, it looked lost until they called that penalty on the 2-point conversion like 10 minutes after the play.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Watching that, and I was on Phil's money line because of the inclement weather. I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and watch 4 quarters of this and then push at the end with a Buffalo -3. I think was the best line available at the time.
Yeah, it looked like they were going to kick a field goal. Looked like they were ready to go for the field goal, and then they go, we'll run one more play, and then he runs it in for this touchdown.
Yeah, and that helped everybody else. I'm like, oh, great. But yeah, I would have been good money line, but yeah, certainly had 9 lives in that game, and the penalty in the Jack Doyle caught 2-point conversion. I thought it was one of those crazy calls that you see all year this season with refs. If Roger Goodell wanted to point to anything about how legalizing gambling would affect his sport, he could point to this season, but we're already doing it anyway, grumbling about how much control these refs have over the actual outcomes of games. But getting back to this matchup, if the Bills are healthy, I think, because of what happened last week, they almost have this touch of a team of destiny. I mean, if you're trying to rip your team apart, I don't think you could do a better job of it than the decision to start Peterman, even though it was one of those things where you're trying to shoot for the moon and see how much better you can be. It still had a divisive ending to it, given the 5 interceptions. So you come back from that and you're still in position to make the playoffs. You may as well go ahead and finish the job.
Yeah, but again, keeping in mind though that the Bills are going to need some help because first of all they're going to have to win 2 out of 3 against a division opponent that is even to them, and that's not always easy. And then sandwiched in between, they're going to lose next week in New England. So their chances of making the postseason are really going to hinge on what the Chiefs, the Chargers, and the Ravens do. Just as much as what they do. We'll get to those teams and we'll get to the Ravens and Tennessee in just a minute. But actually, right now with Tennessee's at San Francisco. And by the way, could you imagine that the Niners are a 2-point favorite at home against Tennessee, an 8-win Tennessee team against San Francisco? But Garoppolo has changed everything. I just love the fact that San Francisco is winning with Garoppolo. We talked about team tank all season. And we even talked about this, about just watch what happens if they win these games with Garoppolo. That they're going to have pie in their face, because the draft position is going to be taken away, which is exactly the reason that they didn't want Garoppolo in there. And number two, it's going to prove that they just were a bunch of liars, saying that Garoppolo, he wasn't ready, whatever. It's just total nonsense. They were just tanking. And Beathard's injury opened the door. They had to put Garoppolo in there. Now they've won 3 out of 4. The reason why they're probably favored by 2, and you tell me if you agree with this, is because this is the 4th road game in the last 5 weeks for Tennessee, and in those 3 road games, they're 1-2. And as we talked about last week, they do not win. Even when they win, they don't cover very well, which means they're always in these low-scoring games. They have only scored more than 20 points on the road, I believe, once, I think, all season. Matter of fact, they have not scored more than 20 points on the road over their last 6 games. And they only had 7 points last week in Arizona. So they go on the road. Even when they're at home, they don't score a lot. But when they go on the road, they don't score at all. So I can kind of understand, with the whole 4 out of 5, why San Francisco, with their 3 wins in the last 4, might be the short home favorite.
Right, bad road team, and coming off a brutal performance where Mariota's just, basically, well, I have no idea what happened to him last week, his decision making, and he's had issues with that all year. But it was awful last week. That was it pretty much ruined my Sunday. So from that standpoint, I could see why the Niners are favored. But at the same time, it's a divisive spread because Tennessee has more to play for, obviously, and probably if they were the 2-point favorite, you wouldn't have blinked. So, from the standpoint of this being a trap line, you've got those people out there with their eyebrows raised.
By the way, San Francisco with the 3rd pick in the draft, tied with the Colts, even though both of those teams have quarterbacks. I know there's talk about, will San Francisco trade Garoppolo and get a big package for him? I think what people are trying to, but here's the reason why I don't see that happening. Because what's going to happen if they make that trade? Then that means that they're moving down, and then that means that they're not going to get one of the top quarter. They're not going to get Rosen, and they're not going to get Darnold. So there's no way they're making that trade.
I think it's just about keeping your options open, and if somebody comes with a ridiculous deal, then you're in a position to potentially take it. That's all it is. But yeah, I don't think, and we've had this conversation, I think, every week. I'm fully on board with them tanking.
Sure.
And I think this is exactly why. Now, all of a sudden, although Garoppolo has done absolutely nothing to decrease his trade value, he's also put you in a position where you're now not going to pick in the top 3 potentially.
And Trent Brown, by the way, the right tackle, is having a good year. He's been out the last 3 weeks, and the 49ers not very happy. They kind of think that he should be playing, so that's something to keep an eye on in the offseason. Maybe Trent Brown will be playing somewhere else. And by the way, Mariota is also dealing with those ankle and hamstring injuries. So, and we know what happens when he doesn't play. So any play now, Marcus Mariota could be knocked out, and if he gets knocked out, they're not going to win. They'll be 8-8, and they won't make the postseason. So that's how close their chances are from either a wild card, a division title, or not even making the postseason. By the way, next week they host the Rams, and then they host the Jags. So this is their last road game. And speaking of the Jags, their last home game is against Houston. And they're an 11-point favorite. This would be a really solid play. I see no reason to not take the Jags in this spot. They dominated Houston week 1. And a couple of reasons I like this. One, obviously, they're just sky high. Psychologically, they're through the roof right now after the win last week. Throw in the fact it's their final home game. Throw in the fact if they win the game, they clinch a playoff spot. Throw in the fact that TJ Yates is starting for Houston, and that Houston has only won 1 game all season without Deshaun Watson as the starter. And I see no reason to think that the Jags want to annihilate Houston in this game.
Yeah, and the biggest variable is Blake Bortles and not supplying points to Houston or via short fields or direct pick sixes. So the fact that he's playing as well as he is, really the best ball of his career, strengthens your argument. He just got to keep it up because he's been so consistent.
Yeah, right now they're the 3 seed, and it looks really solid that they're going to end up as the 3 seed, which is a great spot to be in the AFC. If going up against that 6 seed. Of course, you don't want to be playing the Chiefs or the Chargers or maybe even the Ravens, but if you could play the Bills or maybe even Tennessee as the 6 seed, then that's a good spot to be in. All right. By the way, next week the Jags are hosting. The last 2 games of the season, the Jags are going to be at San Francisco and then at Tennessee. Speaking of Baltimore, they're at Cleveland, and we talked about what you would need to see in the game against Pittsburgh to kind of feel that maybe Baltimore had definitely improved themselves enough to be a legitimate playoff caliber team. They didn't win the game. I look at the game, and there were some things that obviously I didn't like when they lost the game, like the fact that it cost me some money there that I was very disappointed about, no question. But then I looked at it and I said, look, it's Pittsburgh. They're hot. They're just finding ways to win games. I actually look at it as a positive that they were able to do what they were able to do against Pittsburgh and almost beat them. You can question some of the play calling on their last drive, but fact is they were a play away from beating Pittsburgh for the second straight year in Pittsburgh. And now they get a schedule where they play Cleveland this week, Indianapolis next week, Cincinnati after that. All Baltimore has to do now is play the way they've been playing over the last few weeks, the last 3 weeks, and they'll have 10 wins and they will make the postseason.
Yeah, they showed up, so they relieved some of my reservations. But I think that Cincinnati game it sounds easier on paper, certainly than it probably will be. Considering it might be Marvin Lewis's last game, they do have the better quarterback situation out of the 3 games you mentioned. I think those first 2 are clear wins, including this week against the Browns. I think they had their chance at finally breaking through for a victory this year, and are going to end up winless.
All right. 4 straight wins, by the way, in the series for Baltimore over Cleveland, both straight up and against the spread, including a 14-point win earlier this year, week 2, as a 7-point favorite, just like they are in this one. And Cleveland, of course, is going to end up with the first pick. And they're in a really good situation right now with the 1st and 5th picks of the draft. So they're going to be able to get either Josh Rosen or Sam Darnold, and then get a really good pick also with pick number 5 if they want. So Dorsey just, is that not the best job in the world to be a GM looking for work and you get hired by Cleveland with all those draft picks?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, for Sashi Brown being out of his element, he at least did a decent job of stockpiling them with picks.
He did. All right. Then you got Philly and the Giants. Carson Wentz out, of course. Nick Foles is in. And it looks like Zach Ertz will be back this week. The Eagles clinch home field throughout the playoffs if they get a win and Minnesota loses. They've beaten the Giants 6 out of the last 7. And the Giants, meanwhile, are 0-6 straight up and against the spread in their last 6 games when the odds are single-digit spreads, just like it is here. Eagles favorite by 7.5. I think the Eagles should cruise in this one.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite game of the week. I think that I don't know if I'll make it my lock, but this will definitely be one of my 5 super contest picks. I just see the sense of urgency to try to make sure that everybody is still supremely confident despite the loss of Carson Wentz.
Yep.
Focused. Permeates throughout this one where everybody brings their game up around it.
Yep. I agree. They should be focused in this game. And this is the last road game of the season. They end up Oakland and Dallas at home. So we'll see probably a supreme effort by Philly in this one, you would imagine. And
plus, I think you the point you made about Spagnuolo earlier and not going for it on 4th down. I think he's on somewhat of a mandate. Don't win games. Why would you?
Maybe you're right. By the way, what do you think? You think it's a lock that the Giants get a quarterback, or do you think that that it's a possibility that they're thinking maybe Eli stays here for a couple of years and maybe we should go out and draft a guy like Barkley or trade?
No, I definitely think. To me, I think it's where they end up and how much confidence. I guess they've been looking at Rosen most of all. From what I've been reading, is their main scout has fallen in love with him. So I mean, if you like him, you take him and you put Manning in a mentor role next year. And I think he'll take the first snap of the 2018 season for the Giants. Eli.
All right, interesting. I mean, I guess I could see that happening. You just wonder though. It all depends on how long Eli wants to play too. I mean, if Eli says I want to play another 2 or 3 years, then you start to think, well, okay, if you're going to leave the Giants, then after a year, you might as well leave now, and just throw in the kid as long as you think the kid's ready.
Right, but the way he handled this whole situation, I think if you mend fences with him, it also increases your bargaining power to get something for him down the road when you do move him. A lot of factors there because he's Eli Manning and not somebody that's going to cause too much of a stink. And that you do want around your next franchise quarterback. There's lots of reasons to keep him.
Yeah, I could see him. Yeah, I could see that as a way to trade him after you acquire your pick, or you don't even have to wait. If you got the second pick, you're getting your guy or one of your guys. Then you trade Eli at the draft, and you trade him to a team that is it feels like they're a quarterback away from winning the Super Bowl now. I don't know who that is.
Yeah,
I don't know
if somebody knocks your socks off with a deal, obviously, absolutely.
All right, Atlanta, Tampa Bay, and a big game for Atlanta. No reason to think that Julio Jones won't have another monster effort against Tampa Bay's weak secondary. He had 12 catches, 253 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the meeting a few weeks ago. Atlanta is definitely the play here. They're a 6-point road favorite. The Bucs have lost 8 straight games that Jameis Winston has started. McCoy is banged up. Not sure he should play. He's got the bicep injury early in the game last week. Falcons have won 4 of their last 5. First road game since the Seattle game on the 20th of November, and only the second road game for the Falcons since November the 5th. So first road game after 3 straight home games. They'll end the season at New Orleans and hosting Carolina. So I like Atlanta in this one, -6. It's going to take an awful lot of bad. I can't see Atlanta losing this game.
Yeah, it's a must win. You've got a little extra preparation time, and your last 2 games are going to be much tougher than this one. So, to keep the ride going after that fortunate win over New Orleans, you have to hold serve here.
And by the way, I could easily see Atlanta winning this game and losing their last 2. So,
sure.
And which could open the door for a team like the Packers or one of those other teams on the outside right now, passing Atlanta in for that final spot. Okay, Jets and the Saints. Saints favorite by almost 16, and Josh McCown is finally out. Took 13 games, and Petty will get his shot. We'll see what he does. That's all I could say. Right now, the Jets have the 10th pick in the draft. I still think that's good enough to sit there. They don't have to move at all, and they can draft Baker Mayfield. So I definitely hope, and I can imagine that's probably what's going to happen because they have to end their season with the Chargers and the Patriots after this. So can't imagine the Jets are going to get a win the rest of the season. Saints, meanwhile, continue to deal with injuries. Hendrickson, the rookie, was doing a good job as a situational pass rusher. He got hurt last week. He's probably out. A.J. Klein's been banged up. We've talked about Okafor out for the season, so they continue to get guys banged up on defense. Coming off the loss against Atlanta, which probably they only lost because Kamara got hurt in the game. He comes back. You just feel really good, though, with the Saints, and just like you said a little while ago, that the Saints might very well be the team to beat now.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think they are, and we'll see how difficult they make life for Bryce Petty.
Cincinnati and Minnesota. Minnesota favored by 10.5. They're at Green Bay next week. They clinched the North with the win, and considering they do play Green Bay next week, they might want to do that just in case. Even though they do host Chicago to end the season at home. Zimmer against Marvin Lewis. So remember we talked about Cincinnati having a hangover against Pittsburgh, against Chicago. Well, it's exactly what happened. So what happens this week now that they go on the road? I don't know if they get out of it because a lot of guys are still banged up. So in Minnesota coming off a loss, I can see this game being over by the fourth quarter. I think it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, they had nothing last week, so presumably they're going to be a lot better this week. And if they're not, they're going to get annihilated based on who they're playing.
By the way, the Vikings played 5 of their last 6 games on the road. So only their second home game since October 22nd. So they're definitely happy to be home against the Bengals as a 10-point favorite. And then finally, Arizona and Washington, 2 teams that probably have dealt with more offensive line injuries combined in one game. Third offensive lineman out for the year, Jared Valdir. He's out, joins Humphreys and Iopati. Gabbert was sacked 8 times last week, and yet Arizona still won. First road game for Arizona since November the 19th. Washington did not look good last week at the Chargers. Favored by 4.5 here. They've lost 4 out of 5. Favored by 4.5.
Yeah, I mean, great effort last week for the Cardinals to win that game, but they shouldn't have, and that might come back to bite Tennessee.
What was that?
I said that might come back to bite Tennessee, not being able to seal the deal last week.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, can't beat Arizona when you sack the guy 8 times. And would they score 7 points? I would very much agree with that. All right, Tony.
12-7, I died on every play. Go ahead.
I can only imagine. So it's harder than for me losing with the Pittsburgh game, because at least when you lose against Pittsburgh, you're losing against Ben Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh. I can't imagine being in that. Well, I can't imagine losing and being in that spot and losing to Arizona. So that's even worse. I don't know if that makes you feel any better. Probably doesn't. All right, Tony.
No, I mean, it will make you feel better to see Mike Mularkey pay with his gig at the end of the season.
Yes.
But I'm not a vengeful type.
Well, look, if they lose 3 straight to end the season, which could happen if Mariota gets hurt, then maybe it will be time to finally move on. All right, Tony, I appreciate it as always. Enjoy the bowl games. By the way, enjoy those FCS playoff games, too. Semifinals this weekend. Keep an eye on that Jeremy Briscoe kid. The Sam Houston State quarterback is, I think he's like what is he? I think Dan has him as the 4th-rated senior quarterback prospect in the draft. So, keep an eye on him if anybody's watching the FCS playoffs, Sam Houston State. The bowl games start this week, and I assume that you're going to be ready for that as well with your...
Yep, happy bowl season.
All right, sounds good. Tony, I appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, man. Take care, Chris.
Take care. All right, that is Tony Mejia, and that will wrap it up here for our NFL coverage for Week 15. Now, coming up, Dan Schonk is going to join me at 6 o'clock if you're listening live. We're going to preview the FCS playoffs as far as the top pro prospects to keep an eye on for the NFL draft, including Briscoe. And then later on tonight, we're going to talk Oregon football. We've got to preview the Boise State game at 8 o'clock. Tomorrow, we have National Writer on at 1 o'clock to preview the bowl season. And then at 3 o'clock, we have another college football show to preview some of the big games in the Conference USA and the Sun Belt. So a lot of college football talk coming up to end the week. Thanks to Tony Mejia. I'm Greg DePalma. We'll see you next time here on the Our Lads Football Radio Network's NFL Preview Show on the Our Lads Football Radio Network.